All right, here today with Andrew Myers, who is the king of real estate meetups in the Denver area. If you go to a real estate meetup, it's probably Andrew's. But he's got a really interesting business model. You guys do furnished rentals in a very specific market. So super excited to dive in and kind of learn more about that with you. So Andrew, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, always a pleasure. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So do you want to just give people a quick background in how you got into real estate, what you did before that, and then kind of how it led you to where you are now?
Yeah, for sure. I have been in the real estate industry for probably more than 18 years. Started back in 2009. During the recession, I came out of real estate school, graduate program, and worked at a brokerage and a commercial brokerage, and nobody was hiring at that point, and so I joined on to the federal government, the General Services Administration, and luckily found a good place there for 12 years. So that was my primary career, managing the federal government's real estate all across the Western United States. Everywhere for me, everywhere from Alaska down to Texas, for a specific agency. And I did a lot of cool like workplace consulting in office buildings and things like that. So really fun time during my career. And then on the side in 2017, I started investing in real estate through house hacking, and then started buying my own stuff in 2019. And so I just started with, I actually started right out of the gate pretty fast. I bought 3 properties in the span of 6 months. And at that time I realized, I asked myself what was the barrier to entry for me, and it was capital. And so how do I break down that wall? And I made some phone calls and did my sales pitch of, you're not investing in the property, you're investing in me, and hopefully you can trust me. And I raised money to buy 3 properties within that 6 months. And ever since then, the freight train has been moving, and that momentum has been great. So about 2 years ago, I left my, no, sorry, 4 years ago, I left the government job and then took a bridge job. And 2 years ago, I jumped into full-time real estate. So right now I'm a full-time investor and full-time real estate agent that works pretty much exclusively with investors here in the Denver area, which is fun because it's a lot of teaching and guiding and hand holding, and also I learn from other investors I work with as well, which is really cool. So on the investing side, though, I have a small portfolio of 6 properties, 2 single families, a threeplex, a sevenplex, and last year we scaled up with a 12plex and a 20 unit as well, mostly in the furnished space. But have experience in short-term, mid-term, and long-term rental through my 7 years or so of experience. So
Nice. So we'll get into the furnace space there, but going back to your job working for the federal government, I've never heard of that, right? I guess you think about it, the government has a ton of real estate and they need that portfolio managed. What was that like?
absolutely, yeah, it was. It was. I mean, when you look at the numbers, the federal government is the largest landlord in the United States. So we manage all of the federal. We actually own, as an agency, the GSA, all of the federal government's, most of the federal government's real estate. The other owners are, a lot of VA owns a lot of their own real estate. Military obviously owns a lot of their real estate, and then agencies like the Department of Interior, they have very specialized space, and they own that. But predominantly, I don't know the exact numbers, but I would say probably 80 to 90% of federal government's real estate was owned and managed by the GSA, and so that means that all the courthouses, federal buildings in the largest cities and the smallest of towns, we run their real estate. And I was fortunate enough to spend 4 years with the Department of Interior, as their client executive, making sure that their real estate was taken care of in the entire Western United States. So that's why I said Alaska to Texas. So I had a portfolio to make sure that was running and firing of about 85 million square feet of space. So
So they're not obviously like buying and selling real estate. So when you say managing their portfolio, you're basically talking about what, like ongoing maintenance or what kind of
yep,
stuff?
yep, yeah. So a lot of that was leases, leases that we have with commercial owners out there, and so we would lease space the GSA would actually lease space from the commercial owners, and then we would sublease out to the individual agencies, whether that's IRS, FBI, DOI, whatever. And we would manage those leases and and hold those leases. And then the federal buildings or the courthouses, we would run all the maintenance. We would lease it up, like try to fill those with federal agencies. So there was that function, and then asset management, huge asset management to make sure that the buildings are optimized and making sure that they're not losing money, which a lot of them are. Which the efforts of Doge that you see now, they are coming out with long lists of proposed disposals of our federal inventory, and I get it. I mean, there's some underperforming assets out there that are just costing the taxpayer a ton of money, and that's not necessarily a good thing. But so yeah, that's kind of what that entailed. And I spent 5 years in the government, also traveling around the country as a workplace consultant. So I was trying to get federal agencies to squeeze down their space because they had abundance of space, and they had 100 people working in it, right? So then I would go in and say, hey, we can consolidate this, and you can start thinking about how you work differently with telework, with hotel stations. Not everybody needs a 200 square foot private office anymore. No, that's just not how things work anymore. So how can we take 20,000 square feet down to 5,000 square feet and do some new design and all that? So that was probably one of the most fun parts of my federal career is doing that strategy consulting on the workplace side.
And they basically have an unlimited budget. So saving them money is probably not the primary incentive. Was there something you found that like motivated government agencies to actually want to make a change in how they operate their real estate?
No, it was really down to the financial cycles of the different administrations. Because I was under Obama's administration for 8 years, and then Trump, and then I left right before Biden took office, and the pendulum really shifts, and so the GSA and other agencies are allotted so much money for real estate, and we'd have to kind of work within those parameters of how much money was allocated, and then that would just kind of like switch every single year because new budgets would have to get passed and all this stuff. This being a vet, like there's just like so much that went into trying to figure out what the appropriations were for the government. So it was always changing, but it was a slow process, and that's why I decided to get out. Was I just didn't want to be a government bureaucrat for another 20 years. And
I hear
and,
you on
and,
that.
and, and interesting enough, and we don't need to get into the politics of it, but my work unit that I left was pretty much decimated with Doge in the last 4 to 6 weeks. So I would have been on the chopping block if I was still in that work unit. But I dodged that bullet a little bit. But I'm happy doing what I'm doing now.
Well, it showcases the importance to build your own real estate and your own cash flow
Oh,
because government
totally,
jobs
totally.
are considered to be the safest. And I'm a huge fan of them getting cut. Obviously, for the people who have the jobs, that sucks. But it's, you know, it's just a perfect example that not everybody, gets to stay. You have to kind of look out for yourself because at the end of the day, no one else is going to look out for you, including the federal government, especially the federal government.
100%. And let me touch on that for a second. Like when we were working in the government, the people I was around, and even me, the golden handcuffs were real. It was like why people the attitude that most people had, and And there was no reason for them to think otherwise, was that I'm going to be in this job until I'm 62, and I'm going to get my pension, and I'm going to get my Social Security. I'm going to retire, and I'm going to, sail off into the sunset. And it's been actually pretty surreal to see that idea or that mentality was dashed very quickly with the new administration, and where that hope and that dream of being a government official for so long could actually come to an end. Nobody thought that would ever be a reality, and here we are today. So I'm just thankful. I never had that mentality. I didn't think I was a lifer, to be really honest. And that COVID had me reevaluate a lot. And fortunately, when I left the government, my mentality was, if my pension is going to be my real estate portfolio, my Social Security, not guaranteed, along with the pension, not, those things are not guaranteed. I'm going to use a real estate portfolio to be my long-term wealth building retirement portfolio, right? So I that was always my belief. That was always my belief that's how, I would look at my own career. So
Yeah. Yeah, and even the guaranteed pensions that like do come about. I mean, there's no guarantee that it will keep up with inflation, right? So the idea that they'll just take care of you forever, no, they'll give you what they said, but what they said may not help you. I used to talk to a lot of vets or coworkers at the time when I was in the military about like, hey, you got to sit down and do the math as to what that pension will get you, because it's
Right.
basically a mobile home in the middle of Kansas on its own land near nothing. Like
Right.
if that's all you get,
Right.
a couple years outside after leaving, that's it. So you really have to be careful and still take. I mean, it's a really nice cushion, right? There's no doubt, but it's not like, hey, now we're going to travel the world. I mean, some of them at 38, right? If you join right after high school, you can retire,
Right.
but a
Right.
lot of them double retire. You see them work as like a postal worker or something for
Oh,
another 20 years to get
yeah,
two retirement.
I had colleagues that were retired military that they worked with me at GSA for sure, and that's great. That's awesome for them.
Nice. Did you find yourself ever being like the Ron Swanson of the government real estate, like suggesting me? If I was in your shoes, I'd probably suggest the IRS office be, I don't know, South Side Chicago, maybe Detroit, somewhere they don't want to go into the office, so they can't do their jobs. Did you ever get to do anything like that, or was it mostly like, hey, let me actually try to help these agencies work?
I think I had a pretty good mentality of finding good space that worked, was mission focused, and was meeting all the needs of what their mission required. So
Nice.
that's usually what I
Well,
was focused on.
you're better that man than me. I would not have been thinking that. I would have been taking the opportunity for the wrong things. But anyway, so
Yeah.
what do you
I
think
mean, well,
transitioning
and I
more?
always say this, like I now that I'm in as an agent, I'm very client focused, of course. Like I'm very grateful for anyone who chooses to work with me. But I remember having a Trump appointee in the first administration. She was like a special advisor for the Department of Interior, and she jumped down my throat because we were trying to award this lease in Grand Junction, Colorado for the Bureau of Land Management. And it was a huge political move because BLM was going to move their headquarters out of DC, which was like an unmentionable. They were going to move it to the west. And it was like huge. And we were on the brink of awarding this lease. And she was on the phone with me and said, "What are you going to do to get this lease signed?" And she's like, "Are you going to do backflips for me? Are you going to like?" She was just, and I was working with our highest position guy in our region, and I was like, "We got to get this done," and we did. So when I think of like high stress client service, I'm like, I've been there. I've had Trump appointees like making sure that crap gets done, let's say. So that was one of my marquee moments of actually getting something to the finish line that was very high profile and high anxiety, high stress. So
Yeah. Well, that's cool, man. I grew up near DC, and I can tell you it's a bubble. And the
yeah,
more, you can say government should be bigger or smaller or whatever, but the more we get out of DC, actually in the country, in the areas for these agencies to actually work, the better. Because it makes it that much harder for lobbyists to get out there and do, whatever it is they do to help us,
yeah,
and actually be near the people they're supposed to help. So I think
yep,
that's awesome.
yep.
So is there anything you've learned from that time that, like, you look back at today as a private real estate owner, and you buy real estate for profit? Is there anything that you've taken from the government's perspective on real estate that's really like shaped how you buy?
Actually, one of the things, gosh, I hate to say it, but in a way, kind of like doing the opposite of what I was doing, because I feel like the due diligence that we did on the government was really wishy-washy, because we really just, again, we had like an unlimited pot of money. I mean, at least it seemed that as such. And we had a specific amount we had to allocate, and you know, I I did not use the investment fundamentals that I use now when I was evaluating the numbers for, let's say, a lease or something in the government. And so as I was starting to buy my own real estate and also raising capital, where I was having to show other people what the numbers look like, things had to cash flow. We had to get a good IRR. We had to look at all the risks. That is not how we underwrote things in the government. It was like very mission focused. Is this space going to meet the mission's needs? How much does it cost? Is it kind of within market? Great. We kind of did like a return on investment thing, but not really. So, I mean, it's kind of like opposite of what you're asking. I became way more focused on the due diligence than I ever was in the government with real estate. It's just a different atmosphere, because it's higher stakes, I think, in terms of the actual investment that's made, whether it's by you and time and money, or your money partners who are relying on your work to bring a return on their investment. So I think that was a big. I was very removed from that, and approached it way differently than I did in the government. So that was one learning, I guess. But and I think, again, like if there was like a positive learning thing, is most of my time there in the government was very high level customer service. So as I take that into, tenants are my customers, investor partners are my customers, and in my agent business, my clients obviously are my customers. So I have the highest standard for customer service for myself and any of the partners that I work with, like vendors, um, uh, uh, other business partners and investor partners. Like I just have very high expectations, because I've been in high stress high level customer service in the past. So that's something I think I'm glad that I'm wired that way anyways, but I think being in the government definitely helps.
Well, to have a strategy that's the opposite of what the federal government does is always a safe bet. So that's good to have.
Yeah.
So you transitioned from that into, now you operate furnished rentals. That's like your primary, I would say, your biggest thing that you do.
I'd say
So
so.
what is it that led you down the path to say, hey, furnished rental makes the most sense to me. This is where I'm going to put my time and energy.
I think it's a couple layers to that. Um, One, like I said, I'm wired for customer service. I'm kind of wired for like the hospitality mentality. So it doesn't really phase me if I get an Airbnb request and there's something that's kind of, not great with the place or something. Like, I want to serve that guest and make sure that their experience is a good one. So that's kind of second nature to me, to and funny, Some of my early like high school and college jobs was front desk at a hotel at a couple Marriotts. So like serving guests and giving that customer service has always kind of been in my blood. So it's actually something I like to do. So I think that's one thing that is why I got into it. Later down the road, recently, it's been more of like the value add strategy because in multifamily, in some single family, let's say 5, 6 years ago, not so much now with interest rates are crazy, but the value add was you can make a little bit more money. There is a little more work, but you can make a little more money and have a higher return if you're doing either short-term rental or a mid-term rental. So, especially in the apartment buildings that we bought last year, our strategy is to turn a good amount of those long-term rentals into mid-term rentals because we're taking what would be a one-bedroom apartment that would rent for, let's say, 650 or 700, and then we furnish it, and now we're charging around 1350 for that unit. So we're almost doubling the the rental income on those single units. So that's been our value add strategy. If you're doing normal multifamily, sometimes you're improving the units, which we are doing a little bit of that too. But you're just improving the units, you're improving the amenities, you're working on some deferred maintenance and putting some capital improvements into it. And we're doing some of that, but our main value add strategy is taking it from long-term rental and we're furnishing it. And by furnishing it, we can kind of vacillate between short-term rental and mid-term rental. And fortunately, my team, and my partner up there, we have the furnished experience in running short-term rentals and mid-term rentals. So we can kind of decide seasonally or based on demand what's going to be best for that particular unit. So, and I think that does require expertise. Like, I've been running an Airbnb since at any given time for almost 8 years. So I kind of know the trends, understand the demand, and understand what guests and tenants are looking for in the furnished space. So I think I have a pretty good experience and skill level there. So.
Nice. So your value add is not necessarily like taking an older unit and completely revamping it. It's taking an existing solid unit, and obviously you probably put money into the furniture, but it's not, I would guess, not anywhere near the cost of completely remodeling a unit and therefore like remodeling a whole building.
That's right. And when we did the due diligence on both of the buildings we bought last year, we obviously walked every single unit and we kind of estimated what it would take to get it to like a good cent, uh, get it to a good decent rental. And then what can we then do to furnish it nicely with good design, good amenities within the unit. And so, there some were needed more, needed new flooring. We needed to redo the bathrooms a little bit, right? Clean them up and make them like livable. Because when in a furnished space, you certainly want things to look presentable. I think in long-term rental, you can kind of get away with some things because you're only charging 600, $700 a unit. And we haven't mentioned and we haven't talked about this, but my main market is Fargo, North Dakota. So in that particular market, we kind of know the market dynamics that, if it's a $600, $700 one bedroom, people aren't expecting too much out of it. But if they're gonna be in a furnished space with nice furnishings, you wouldn't want to have nice furnishings and then like junky bathroom with gross toilets and stuff like that. So we do improve that a little bit on each unit. But we don't go crazy. We're not renovating it to make it, the most marketable thing on the market. It's just getting it to a certain standard.
Yeah. In the mobile home park space, we call that lipstick on a pig.
There we go.
Like
Yeah.
if you're gonna rehab something and try to get it to a nicer client, you gotta do it right. You can't just throw it a little bit there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Fargo, North Dakota. For people who don't know you, you're not from there. You never lived there, right? Nope. So you live in Denver. It's not even really easy driving distance. How did you decide that that market was the right one for you?
Well, fortunately, with the government, I was able to travel to some interesting places. The region that I covered was covered the Dakotas, also covered Montana, Utah, Wyoming, and Colorado. So I was traveling all over those states. And one summer, I went up to Fargo, and when I was there, they were hosting their first TEDx conference, and there was like a lot of cool buzz up there. And I just kind of really liked it, and I had started thinking about where to invest. And so I started actually looking into the economics of it. And in 2008, when the national unemployment went from what average 4 or 5 up to 10, and then it's been trickling down from there. But Fargo went from 2% unemployment to 4%, and then that was its peak, and then went has been going down, and I think it's in the twos right now. So that just showed me right off the bat that it was a very stable market, and there are jobs there, people are employable. There are different industries, and I started doing more research around the industries, and obviously there's oil and gas. A lot of that is on the west side of the state, but it does trickle down to the east side of the state where Fargo is. There's a few universities, there's a few hospitals. That town of Fargo serves a lot of the rural communities, so people are always descending upon um, uh, upon Fargo, and just made me think. Like, I have a guest in one of my single family homes up there. I think they live in a rural community, and they're actually getting medical treatment in Fargo. So that's just an example of who comes to Fargo and for what. One Costco, one Sam's Club, one Target. That like everybody's coming. So and the price points are lower, and it's still a cash flow market with even with the higher interest rates. But still, I think there's still opportunity in the value add, which is what we're doing, the value add furnished space, to even make more return on our investment. That's kind of how I got into that market, because I stumbled on it, and I started investing and buying there. In 2020, I bought my first deal there.
Nice. It's always good to know the story of an area, right? I mean, I look at properties all over, so I'm constantly looking at different markets. I'm like, I have an asset class. I just look for where opportunities are, and so it's what's really interesting about looking at market data. It never tells you the full story. Like you really, really have to. I think you have to go to any market you want to invest in and understand what the data is actually telling you. Right? The data is just going to support one thing or another, but it doesn't tell you enough. Like, I have one where the poverty rate is 25%,
Mm.
but it's a college town. So that makes sense, right? Like the data will tell you one thing, but you have to go
Yeah.
further. What are some of the growth statistics or something that you would look like? Let's say you didn't want to do Fargo anymore and you wanted to look to a new area. What are some of the stats you would look for before going there and trying to figure out if the market could support your type of project?
Yeah, I think a lot of those basic stats about like where is population going, instead of where are they leaving. So I think we're seeing a lot of that in the Sun Belt, a lot of that in the Midwest. I think still the coasts are just not. I mean, there's still demand there, of course. There's always going to be demand in the coastal cities, but I think ever since COVID, we're seeing a lot more of a migration inwards, because I think price points alone are allowing people to experience home ownership and find different jobs. And I think if you look at the other ones I would look at, and I haven't done this, but it's like where are the best tax incentives for companies and businesses. Because when industries and companies are looking, when they're looking to relocate, they're looking for places that are friendly to business, offer good tax benefits, and then, they'll build their company there, and then, you know, the population will follow because of the jobs that are created. So Fargo, for instance, has I haven't checked this lately, but um, at one point they do have the second largest Microsoft facility outside of their headquarters. So it was that part of thing, like, oh, there's actually some tech industry as well in Fargo, and so that's the industry piece is a big stat line that I would look at to make sure that it's actually attracting population rather than people leaving. So that's one for sure. So
Is it different because your tenants are not staying there for the long term? Are there different things that you would look at? Like I would guess a school zone wouldn't necessarily matter to them as much because they're only going to be there, what, 3 to 6 months typically?
yeah. So what yeah, and this is something you would only kind of pick up on, I think, if you were investing there in Fargo is the winters are harsh, right? I mean, there's no doubt about it. Like minus 20, 30 degrees is not a lot of people want to live there. So I think that keeps the population pretty steady and stable. But in the furnished space, that means companies, hospitals, universities are looking for people to work on contract for shorter periods of time. So we're seeing a lot of people come for internships, adjunct professorships, uh, nurse contracts, just medical tech, radiation techs. I've housed radiation techs and oncology techs um, uh, and shorter term doctors. Um, I think they have the demand for those jobs. They just don't have the people. And so what they're going to do is find those people, bring them on contract for a short period of time, and then once that contract's over, then they find somebody else. So you wouldn't really think about that unless you were kind of entrenched in that market, I think. But that's what we're seeing, and we're definitely seeing some fluctuation in the number of contracts that come through. And oh, the other big demographic is construction projects. So there's big oil and gas projects. There's big electrical infrastructure projects that happen up there. The Red River is flooded all the time, so they're always working on the Red River up there. So one of my houses actually houses a lot of construction folks, and they're a little bit dirty, and they don't necessarily leave it in a good condition, but we've kind of accepted that. But they'll pay top dollar on a monthly basis, so it's kind of like anything can be fixed, and anything can be cleaned, and it kind of makes it worth it when we're getting, 2,500 to 3,000 a month for a little 1,400 square foot house.
Yeah, they get the per diem, so to them it's not really out of their pocket. They're just looking for something safe, probably, and comfortable, and just making sure that their needs are taken care of. And your customer is almost like their employer more so than the customer. Is that? I mean, obviously, probably the customer is picking it, the employee is picking it, but really, who's paying for it a lot of times is probably these companies.
Absolutely. Yep. Exactly right. So
Nice. So, what are the biggest challenges managing a property like this? Because it's not simply like you close and you walk away, it's passive. I mean, no real estate's really like that, but especially something with ongoing operations like
yeah, so the larger properties up there, the 12 unit and the 20 unit, I have a business partner. Shout out to Kyle. He has been my broker on most of my deals up there. He and I decided to partner on these deals, and he has in-house maintenance and in-house property management with his little group of companies. So that's been fortunate. So he runs the on-site project management, furnishing, property maintenance side of things. I run the bookkeeping, accounting, asset management, legal, investor relations. So that's been a really good partnership. We could spend another hour on good partnerships. And then but we meet every Monday to run our buildings, two buildings up there. And right now we are in stabilization phases for both of those. So we are deliberately uh, and strategically trying to figure out when to free up a unit so we can furnish it, get it back online. Should we bring it online as a short-term rental, depending on the season and the time of year? Should we look for a midterm contract? There's a lot of strategy involved in stabilizing these buildings. Just like if you're doing a 100, 200 unit apartment building and doing the value add and construction, like there's a whole strategy on how you're going to actually execute the project. We are we are immersed in the stabilization phases and the execution phases for those two projects right now. So yeah, we're not like in a passive state right now. We are very active in both of those. I self-manage a few of my units up there, and those are stabilized. The big thing that I work on with the ones that I self-manage is leasing those out. So I'm using Furnish Finder, Airbnb, Zillow, getting tenant leads, following up with them. My virtual assistant does a lot of that work, helping me, coordinate all that communication. And then I've partnered with another property manager who runs a couple of my things up there, and I just pay him a monthly, and he's basically on call for any property management or maintenance issue that I need up there that I just don't want to handle. I could, I guess, have a plumber and stuff, but I pay him a pretty reasonable amount every month, regardless of what happens or not. And he's on call and ready to help when I have an issue. And I just had a big leak in my threeplex up there, and the whole ceiling fell through and all that. So he's getting that all fixed before we have some tenants moving in. So it's good to have some of those partnerships up there as well, because I'm not there, and I don't want to be there to be managing that. So those partnerships are key.
As a landlord, I feel like you never want to be the one answering the phones, because the tenant's problem is something they need to be, it needs to be taken care of. But as a landlord, all you hear is how much it's going to cost, and you're just automatically pissed. Like, I used to answer the phones for a lot of the stuff I would do, and the tenants are having a serious problem. Like, hey, I'm out of hot water. I'm just like, damn it. Like, it's frustrating, but it's better to have somebody whose job is to do it. They don't feel the pain of having to spend the money for it. And then the tenants get a better experience because they have somebody who's like excited to help them, because that's their job, instead of somebody who's like annoyed about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did you find those people? How did you form this team that helps you? Because I know for a lot of people, they look at an area and they would love to invest there, but they don't have the team. So how did you get to that point where, hey, now you have the people you can call on?
So in the beginning, I had no connection to Fargo other than literally one or two trips up there. So I had to build a team from scratch, which I don't always, it can be done, but it's a lot of work, and it's an iterative process, just like anything else. I was fortunate enough to be connected to my buddy Kyle, like right off the bat. I cold called real estate agents that were investor focused up there, and he was like my second call. His company was my second call, and the main guy connected me to Kyle. And that's just like a divine serendipitous thing, because he and I have become really good friends, brothers. We've run Spartan races together. We hang out every time I'm in town, and now we're business partners, right? And so and we just help each other. As he's got 3 kids, I've got 3 kids. We help each other as men, like figure out life, and we've become really close. So I feel totally blessed and in some ways lucky to have been to have found Kyle up there. But I mean, if I give advice to people, I actually do tell them, like, if you're looking to invest out of state, what are your connections? Where do you have family? Where are you from? Where did you go to school? Have you traveled to a certain place a lot for work? Because then you kind of have a familiarity already with the market, and you have people already there that can drive by the property, who can ask around for good contacts. But I think your main contact is your real estate broker or agent that you build a relationship with, and if they trust you that you are a serious investor and you will actually take action, they will be more than willing to share their trusted contacts with you. But there is that hump you have to get over to make sure that you're not just a wannabe investor, but that you're actually intending to take action and by that I mean putting offers on things. You have all your ducks in a row. You know what you're talking about. You can speak the lingo, even if you haven't done a deal yet. Just showing that you are going to take action. That real estate agent will probably be your primary partner because they will. And I always say this: if you're going to invest, find a real estate agent that has investments themselves, because there's a mentality there, there's an understanding there, and they can truly help you, and speak from experience. And they're going to have the contacts that you need and hopefully be willing to share those. So that's my advice to people out there if they're just getting started with thinking about how to invest out of state.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that the investor friendly broker. I always view it as like I think there should be two separate real estate licenses, residential and commercial, because they are completely different. And honestly, if you get a real estate license, you don't learn anything about commercial real estate, like at all. I mean, it's basically just, hey, how do you fill out a contract to help somebody buy a house? Whereas commercial real estate is a completely different world. Now, the difference is most commercial real estate investors don't need their hand to be held. They know exactly what they're looking for, and they do it over and over and over again. But you're exactly right. Like finding a real estate broker who knows what you're looking for they're worth their weight in gold. Is it tough for you because the assets you're looking for are not what they're going to be after you buy it? Like you're just buying an existing apartment building, right? But they have to learn to see it for what you want it to be, which is a short-term rental. So they have to not only know like, hey, we've got to look for something that makes sense as is, but we're going to transition it to something. Is that hard to find somebody who can think to that level?
It's not if you've worked with them for a while. Like they know what you're going to look for. Even Kyle, even though we've bought these two deals together, he'll still send me stuff, and I'll remind him like this is not in my buy box, and he gets it. Because speaking of that, like Fargo, its sister city across the river in Minnesota is Moorhead. I tell him don't send me anything in Moorhead. And to be real, it's because it's in Minnesota. It's less friendly. It's not a landlord friendly state. Whatever. So I say I want to just be in Fargo. So when he sends me Moorhead stuff, I'm like, no, not interested. And he knows that. On paper, it might look like a good deal, but I'm not going to invest across the river. So, but over time and trust, he knows what I'm looking for. And at this point, where I am in my investing career is I'm probably not. He'll send me like a duplex or a fourplex here, and I might take a look at it because I think those are pretty. For me at this point, those are pretty easy pickups if I see a good opportunity. But he knows that I could pull the trigger on 10, 20, 30 unit stuff if he finds something. And he's got his connection. He's got brokers bringing him stuff because they know now we are willing and able to buy the bigger stuff. We're proving that we're taking action on some of that bigger stuff. So Kyle has his relationships up there, and he'll bring me something that looks interesting. We bought the 20 unit in June last year, and it was a big daunting project because it was the biggest one that he and I had ever done, and we had no intention to do another deal. And then he brought a 12 unit to us, which was in downtown Fargo. And we looked at the numbers, and it's proving to be a slam dunk. So even when you are not planning on it, there sometimes opportunity arises, and you just got to strike. So
Yeah, it gets the more and more you do the bigger deals. I think what a lot of investors learn is that it takes as much time to do a big one as it does a small one. Like more money, it's a bigger loan, it's more operations. But to get it, it's the same time. And it becomes really difficult as you start growing to like, because that's when you'll get sent deals that you would have been super excited for a year or two ago, and now you have to be like, it's tough because if you don't like, I looked at one yesterday. I'm under contract on one now, but it's pretty much we're just waiting for closing, and so I'm looking for stuff to do. We found this one and it was 15 lots, and 2 years ago I'd have been all about it, but now I have to sit here and say if I start working on that, and a 50 unit or a 100 unit comes my way, I won't have time, and so
Yeah,
I have to pass and just hope that, or not hope, but plan for the next one to come around. So that's tough, but it's
absolutely.
an important part of the growth phase. Like you have to, if you only look for big stuff, that's what you'll start finding.
Yeah, and I think operators like you and me only have so much time and patience in a lot of times. So if we if we're encumbered by, some smaller stuff, it could take our attention from the larger opportunities. And so I think it's always important to to be honestly, to be honest with kind of what your goals are today, because the goals that you have today are different than they were 2 years ago, even a year ago, right? And so just being really honest to what your next subsequent goals are, that will help you provide clarity on the next steps you should take towards those goals.
There's also a lot more competition on small stuff. It's
Yes,
very odd, but like a duplex, you will find way more people excited about buying that than you would a 20 unit, because there's fewer. Now if you get past to like 50 units and above, now there's just like infinite competition from big groups. But in that zone,
for sure.
there's so many people who can do the small ones but can't do those medium sized ones. Is that kind of what you've experienced as well?
Yes, I agree. And the competition that we did have for those two buildings we bought last year was people that were trying to get the numbers working on 20 or 12 long-term units. And the numbers honestly didn't it didn't pencil out, if you were to keep those as long-term units. So we were kind of with our strategy, while it's risky, right? Because we don't know if our value add strategy is actually going to work, but you shouldn't enter into this business if you're not willing to take some risks and do the work. But we were able to pencil them out kind of like at list price, and not everybody's willing to pay list price, but we were, because our pro forma and our project showed us that over a 5-year hold or whatever we were looking at, could really pay dividends, and the numbers could work. So yeah, so I'm sticking kind of, I think I'm sticking into this kind of medium space for a while. I could see myself potentially looking at some other markets, although I do kind of have to start at square one. But but I'm in a different place of how I can build relationships, and also I think I have a track record, and I have AI, and I have my virtual assistant, and so I have way more resources at my fingertips than I did 5 years ago when I was just trying to like find a single family home to invest in.
You also know who you need, right? And you know how to find that. Once you know kind of like what type of help you need, you can find that person quicker in new markets because you know exactly, hey, I'm not just looking for a maintenance guy. I need someone with an investor brain who can
That's
be on the ground and run it.
that's
Once
true.
you know that, okay, well, let me look for people that have that. And if you find it, it's perfect. So do you think you would, if you were to go into a new market, would you start with a new property? Like, would you just say, hey, I'm just going to try to find something, get something under contract, and then we'll start building that team out? Or would you take the approach of like, I really like this market, I'm going to commit to it. Let me build a team out first while we're finding properties.
It is on my list of goals this year to kind of dive into maybe two or three new markets. And so I think it is. I actually think it's kind of doing all that at the same time. So I think it is evaluating the market, and then it also is, especially in this space, that those relationships with brokers is very important. So that networking has to happen, and it has to happen in order to learn if this market is a good fit for my own goals and my own buy box. So I think doing all those things at the same time, is probably part of the process, you know?
Right.
So,
Nice.
so definitely having in mind what I'm looking for, but then also backing that up with availability and opportunities. And some of that can only be found with talking to brokers and, you know, that kind of stuff.
Nice. So in terms of stuff you're working on now, I saw you just came out with a new ebook, right? Your main thing is you're focused on helping other people, who are looking to invest in Denver, house hack, that sort of thing. Like you're actively involved in helping those kind of people find good deals, and you're not just a residential broker who slapped, hey, investor friendly on their LinkedIn profile to get some more things. You actually are, you own your own stuff. You understand the pitfalls of that. So is that anything you would kind of tell the people out there listening who are looking to buy in Denver or surrounding areas, like how to get in touch with you?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my website, ultimaterealestate.net. That's a really good place to start. And like you mentioned, I do help a lot of house hackers. As an investor who started in house hacking, I'm a firm believer in that, and I know you are too, in that strategy to just get your feet wet in gaining the mentality of an investor and a landlord, and uh, and even just owning property. There's a lot to learn with just owning property, and so I'm a big believer of that. So I help a lot of house hackers here in the Denver area, and that's why I came out with my ebook for anybody who's thinking about it. And you can be in another state and read. Hopefully you gain some tips on how to. It's kind of like a playbook for how to get into house hacking, taking it from idea to management and really to the end, and then scaling up from there. So there's that, and then like you, I've started some interviews on my YouTube channel, and I've talked to some house hackers. You, Jeff, are a guest for me, so I appreciate
That's right.
that. We have I have a tax strategist as well, and some different guests. So that's under the Ultimate Real Estate Investor channel on YouTube. And yeah, so those are some of the resources that I provide. And if you're in the Denver area, look up Ultimate Real Estate Investor meetups. We'd love to have you. We have events every week, I guess, Jeff. You and I just started one in one of the towns near us. So excited about that. And yeah, it's just fun being out there connecting with other investors, not just in Colorado, everywhere. We need to keep each other motivated. You never know. Why I believe in meetups so much and networking is just you never know how you can help somebody or how somebody can help you. And you're just building your network and your sphere. And I've met people at meetups where they become capital partners, they become clients, they become really, really good friends. You and I think, are testament to that. We become friends through our meetups, and that if I just gain more friends, that's great. That's
A
great.
win.
Yeah, that's
That's
a
a win.
win. So
I found that everybody has something to teach you. For a while, I just consumed everything, single podcast, YouTube video, anything I could find on mobile home parks. And then they're kind of just all saying the same thing. And so I kind of plateaued in my ability as an operator to like run properties well. It's only when I start getting like learning about storage and learning about hotels and these other things, and I can incorporate those aspects into my business, that I actually started really, really improving. Like we had, the mobile home parks, you could run them with no technology whatsoever. But if you learn from other people that use it, you can make yourself better. And so that's one of the things I would. That's why on my podcast I don't just have mobile home park people. I have people like yourself who have, different outlooks on things that we can learn and use to incorporate in our business as well. So, Andrew, I appreciate you taking the time. This was awesome. So yeah, they know how to get a hold of you, and I hope they do.
awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yep, man.
We'll see you again.
Thanks.